Hello, welcome back. Welcome back to Nigerian XJW Speaks. Hope everyone's doing well today. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for all the support, all the comments that I've been having on the channel, and the appreciation. Yeah, it really means a lot to hear that, there's people out there listening and we're all supporting each other. If you have your own channels as well where you talk about stuff like this, put them in the comment so I can come and support as well and watch and see what you're up to. And I know there's been a few people that have said they are also gonna start talking as well and start sharing, so that's fantastic. The more of us that are talking and sharing, the better. So what I wanted to do today, I've got a bit of a smile on my face at the moment because at least we're not starting out with something grim like the oxygen documentary that I've talked about for my last two videos. This I wanted to talk about my own journey, sort of how I got out of it. This is something I have recorded previously on my second channel, but that was shifted, and that's now going to be dedicated to the stuff that I like to talk about with personal finance and budgeting. So I thought I'll have a separate channel to purely focus on my XJW thoughts and that sort of thing. I'm not quite calling it activism yet. I don't feel like we're quite there. At the moment, we're just talking. So, oh gosh, that was a funny sound. a bit more relaxed today. And let's hope it doesn't go downhill from here. So I was like I've said before, I am Nigerian, obviously, from the name of my channel. I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria, and I lived there until I was 18. My whole family on my mother's side, sort of immediate family, they are all Jehovah's Witnesses. At least I am third generation. On that side, could be more. I don't know. On my dad's side, however, he is the only witness currently. He wasn't born in. He came into it as an adult. He did have a cousin who joined temporarily for some time, but he didn't stick it out. So on his side, he is the only one, and I can tell the difference between the two of them because he has some perspective. How do I put this nicely? Some perspective. Things are less black and white. Do you know what I mean? It's less black and white because sometimes when you are, or maybe most of the time, when you're born as a witness, things can be black and white for you. And no wonder, because you're essentially told that, there's either Jehovah's side or the devil. Those are the only two options. You need to pick a side. In fact, there is a song that is, I don't know if it's still there, Take Sides with Jehovah. It's like they're all about picking sides. So things can be quite black and white for you. And I can tell that difference with my parents. So I was born into the religion from when I was year high. I can remember being taken along, going door to door to preach. In that time, they had the 3 meetings a week. So let me try and get this right this time because I got it wrong in the last video. So on the Tuesday we had the book study, which sometimes was at our house for a period of time because my dad was an elder, probably still is at this point. On the Friday we had the theocratic ministry school and the service meeting after that. I keep getting messages. And then, of course, on the Sunday, you had the public talk and the Watchtower Bible study. I can't speak. So 3 days a week. And then, of course, on the Saturdays, you went out in field service because, being a child, being in school, the Saturday was the time that you did it. And sometimes on the Sunday as well. So after the meeting on the Sunday, you would go out mostly for return visits. I don't know if they still do those. They're usually not talking to new people. You are going back to visit people that you've spoken to before, and conducting Bible study, which essentially was studying of their literature. Yes, so that's the backdrop for my experience with it. So of course I didn't know anything different. I thought about how to do this a little differently this time, so it's less rambly and sort of talking through how I made my way out. So one of the key things that I think was really crucial for the process of me eventually leaving was the hypocrisy that was just pervasive, just everywhere growing up. I'm not sure at that time if I knew someone who didn't have a double life going on. I don't know if that was a Nigerian thing or that was a witness thing. I did later on think that maybe the combination of a high control religion and a very, what's the word? Do I call it conservative culture? But the Nigerian culture really does create an environment where people tended to hide parts of themselves. So when you put that together, what you end up with is a culture where people are saying one thing and doing something else. And that was a key theme for my childhood. And some of it, unfortunately, did have, quite personal, terrible impact, which I'm not ready to talk about today or just yet. But yes, and I think seeing that right from the start was probably part of why things didn't quite sit right. Not just from the point of view of wondering, well, if you're saying this and doing this, do you really believe it? But also from the point of view of feeling like I never quite measured up, because I got wrapped up in that as well. It became accepted and the normal that it is normal to say one thing and do something else. And I was wrapped up in that from being a child, and that guilt that is part of that knowing that when you're going out to preach on a Saturday morning or on a Sunday, when you're going to tell people stuff and you're doing something else, that conflict from quite early on is very, very confusing. It really does have a lot of impact. And maybe once I can put my thoughts together at some point, I can maybe look at some of these separate themes and how they impact the well-being. I'm not a psychologist, but just share my thoughts on those. But yes, that was a key theme. And so throughout the time, even though on the outside I looked like a model witness child, that was the first of three, on the inside I knew that something wasn't quite right. I believe that there was a Jehovah, but that actual connection wasn't quite there. Like that sort of deep down connection that in my mind I felt like that would make you terrified to do something wrong. I don't feel like that was quite there, although I do remember many times thinking any minute now I'm gonna be struck down dead, aren't I, for what I'm doing. That's a horrific thought for a child to be having. But yeah, there was always that hypocrisy there. And so when I got to my teenage years, I'm trying not to be too rambly this time, while I know that it wasn't an option for me to come out and say I wasn't a witness anymore, I wasn't quite sure how much I was going to stick to it. Does that make sense? So yeah, I don't know how else to explain that. I absolutely believe that they were right, the message in itself, that it was just the people. It was just people who were flawed, people like myself who were flawed, that didn't quite meet the mark, and just hoping that maybe one day I would. So when I left Nigeria at 18 and I moved to the UK, the first thing you do when you get somewhere is you look for a kingdom hall. That's what you do, and introduce yourself to the congregation, and you get your publisher's card transferred over, and that's what I did. I came with a group of students. There were 25 of us in total. We come to study, and there was one other witness in the group and a second person who was just studying at the time, so he was an interested person, shall we say. Although my son's still up. Okay, just seeing if he's gonna come off. But anyway, there were the three of us then. So we looked for a kingdom hall and we got started. This was down in Portsmouth, in the south of England, and it was, I have to admit it was a nice. We were welcomed really nicely. The people were lovely, and actually for the first time I saw what I thought were people who actually wanted to be there, people who appeared to be genuine. Okay, yeah, I had to pause there and see what my son wanted. So yeah, they were really lovely, and like I said, for the first time I saw people who it felt like they actually wanted to be there. There was what it seemed to me at the time, no pretense, no hypocrisy. And I went, oh my goodness, it's definitely been me the whole time. This is actually possible. It is possible to be whole souled and whole everything into this. And I said, you know what? I am going to start again in terms of coming clean and deciding going forward, because here's proof that it is possible, which was something that I'd not really seen before in people that were anything younger than 70, shall we say. And guess what? It's usually about sex, isn't it? That's the issue. Well, people who drink, but most of the time it's usually sexual immorality that gets people. So in that group, like I said, there were three of us. So I had a year to stay in Portsmouth. After that, we were going to go to uni. So I said, I don't want to sort of start talking with all these people here. So I'm just going to stick it out for the year. And then when I move to the new place, I would, go to the elders, confess, and just ask to start again and find my belief and my faith. So that's what I did when I moved to the new congregation, because out of that group, I was the only witness who went to the new city where I was going to go to university. So I spoke to the elders, told them everything, told them my doubts, told them what I was thinking, how I felt like there was this wall that was separating me from Jehovah, and I felt like I needed to start again. I needed to have someone study with me and just go through it again. And in my mind, I felt like if I could just connect with one thing, in particular the ransom, if I could connect with that and have that feel real and get the sense of gratitude for that might just be the thing that locates my heart and get me going properly. So spoke to them. A sister was assigned. A lady was assigned. She was a bit of an older lady to study with me. And so this was in 2009, 10, around then. So we would meet every week. Before the meeting, we would do a study, we would have the meal together, so we'd cook together, and then we'd go to the meetings together. So we did that for about a year, close to 2. She was lovely. In hindsight, there were a few flags here and there. For example, one of her daughters was disfellowshipped, and she would the daughter, I mean, would come with the kids, and she'd stand all the way back at the start of the gate because she can't speak to her parents, and just sort of shove the kids in, which, looking back, that is so bizarre, isn't it? And that is something I'm going to probably talk about on another video, the whole shunning and disfellowshipping thing. Anyway, so we did that, and I still wasn't feeling the gratitude. I still felt like I wasn't quite connecting. And what started to happen towards 2011, I started to really, like, the guilt was heavy in terms of I feel so odd in this place. I felt like, how do I put this? Like my presence in the Kingdom Hall was just bringing down the place. And I'm not gonna cry every video, okay? Like, I was bringing down the place, that I was contaminating the place, and it was getting harder and harder and harder to keep going every week. And so around the summer of 2011, I had an opportunity to go for a placement in Belgium. I was going to do that for a year, and I decided that when I went over, I'm not going to look for a Kingdom Hall for the first time ever in my life. I was just going to take some time out, and I don't know, I just couldn't do it anymore. I still absolutely believed that they were right. It was me that was the problem, and I needed to go fix myself, and that I would come back. Never even crossed my mind at this point that I would leave it. So I went to Belgium, didn't find them. When they would come round, I would, politely listen, never said anything about having been raised one myself, being one myself. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention with the rambles, I got baptized, I believe, when I was 12. And it should have been a sign. I remember coming out of the water, and the first thought that goes through my head is, what have you done? What have you done? It's so clear. It's like crystal clear, as bright as day, with my long dark blue skirt and my white t-shirt, all tucked in as you do. And the question was just, what have you done? And maybe that should have been a sign. But, when you grow up where it's not even an option to not be one, I didn't really think much of it. But anyway, so Belgium, fast forwarding back, I lived there, and I completely, I don't know, how do I put this? Like when you wound up a spring so tight and then you let go, and what happens? It completely goes. I basically imploded, and during that year, I went nuts basically, and then at the end of that year, I became pregnant when I was coming back to do my degree. Well, to do my final year that was left of my degree then, which, by the way, I did finish, so fantastic. I did my degree in pharmacology, so I did finish it. It was a tricky year, but I remember coming back to the UK. Obviously, I'd come back to the same city because I was still in the university, and trying to hide away from running into someone who was in the congregation. So I bought I bought I don't know what to call them, niqabs or hijabs, so basically something that Muslim women wear to cover your face, and I literally bought that so I could cover my face when I went out in the streets. And when I would see someone that I knew from the Kingdom Hall, I would do a sharp left, because obviously, being pregnant, I wasn't married, so how do I, there was no way to explain that. At the same time, there were a couple of people that my parents had phone numbers for, and I couldn't risk running into them, and they see me obviously with a belly, and ring them, because at this point I hadn't told them. It was I didn't tell them until, let me see, July, August. So nearly 5-6 months in, around five months in, before I eventually told them. And when I did, literally didn't speak to me for many months. Yeah, we talk now, sort of. But that's a whole other thing. So had the child, and things changed. Basically, someone rather, that I could no longer hide. You know, I couldn't just walk in and pretend I was starting again. So it was just a case of, at that point, finding the right time to go back. I'm trying not to make this too long. So I had my son in 2013. Around a year later, a friend from uni, who happened to be his godparent, had been trying to get me to go to her church for years. And for some reason, at that point, I was open to it, because I really liked the talk about grace, which was explained rather differently, and it sounded really embracing and warm, and they seemed like really nice people, and I liked what they seemed to have, which was this personal relationship with Jesus, and I liked the sound of that. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna check it out. So I started to go to her church, which is like evangelical, charismatic type of church. And again, lovely people. But the whole time I was there, I was having this internal conflict between how they were interpreting scripture with what I'd grown up with. And because I still deep down believed that the witnesses were right, I just couldn't get with the program fully. The one issue that really did stick out for me was Trinity, because I felt like if you cannot get right who it is you're worshipping, it's a non-starter. That's like fundamental. Are you worshipping Jehovah, or are you worshipping Jesus? Like, you think they're equal? That's just crazy. You're wrong. You're dead wrong. So there was that block there, which I felt like stopped me from really immersing and going forward with it. So that carried on for a while, because why not torture myself? So I did that up until around the end of 2017, and by around this point I was getting pretty sick of the whole thing. It felt like this really sore part of my life that I hadn't quite figured out, and I really wanted to figure it out, because obviously, it had impacted my relationship with my family. My mom, she's, like I said, she was born in, that's all she's known, and she absolutely believes that it's right. And that they are taught to what's the word I'm looking for how to treat people that have decided to leave, not undue sort of association. And really, how do I put this, and if they're ever going to watch this, but the conversations that they were trying to have was all sort of coming back to this, and I just wasn't in a place to talk about that. So I was like, I need to figure this out. They're either right and I go back, or they're not and I try and move forward. And so that's where I started to do some research outside the Witness website and literature, which apostate. So I started end of 2017, early 2018, starting with, I don't know how I came across it, but a few channels here on YouTube, which is why I'm talking on YouTube, because I feel like that's been a very helpful resource for me. But going right back to the start, Charles Taze Russell, his belief in the being able to calculate the age of the earth, or when the world was going to end, using the measurements of the Pyramid of Giza. Basically the history of how it all started, the false predictions that there's been regarding, when they thought the world was going to end as well. Of course, the 1914, the 1925, there was something on there, 1975, and whatever else was in there as well. Finding out about Betzerim, which, if you don't know what that is, this is a mansion that was purchased in the US by Joseph Rutherford, who was the second president of the religion, who he actually signed the deeds and documents for that building to be belonging to characters from the Bible that he believed were going to come and live in that property. Look that up. So finding out stuff like that, finding out how they had belonged to the UN for quite a significant number of years, and while at the same time having us go through the book Revelation, is grand climax at hand, where the UN is being portrayed as this terrible beast. So it was a lot of inconsistencies stacking up, and what looked like a man-made decision. And basically, it's like the scale started to fall off. And then looking critically, without making excuses, at the policies that they have, the child abuse policies, I didn't also realize that there'd been a lot of flip-flopping in terms of the blood policy as well, and organ transplants, demonstrably making people die, basically, and then changing their minds about it. And it just looked really man-made. And then, of course, there's the governing body that you have now. You just look at them for what they are. Jeffrey Jackson being called up, I don't know if it was the Australian Royal Commission or wherever he was called onto, and being asked point blank, does he believe that they are God's one true organization on earth? And he basically says it would be presumptuous for us to say that. Well, it's either you think you are or you're not. You're telling us day in, day out in your literature that this is the one true organization, and if someone is not in there, they're part of the wicked system. And now you're being asked point blank, and you're saying that would be presumptuous for you to say. So basically things started to stack up, and it just didn't stand up to scrutiny anymore. And there's a lot of emotions that I went through in that time. Maybe on some level I'm still processing some of it, but it was just so much. I was angry that I was born into this, and it's stolen such a huge part of my life. I think about my son, who is now 7, and I think there's absolutely no way I want him having anything to do with this. So that pretty much strengthened my resolve. Let's use a witness phrase that they like to use a lot. Strengthened my resolve to not go back. Not only do I think it's man-made, but actually demonstrably harmful. It is a high control cult, in my opinion. And that was the story. Now, of course, I'm speaking out. I have had some conversations, like I said, with my parents to say where I'm at, not in as much detail, but basically don't hold your breath, essentially. It's very unlikely that I'm going to be coming back. Of course, I respect their decision to be there. I wish they would leave, but that's probably not going to happen. I would be surprised. Anything can happen, but I have to manage my expectations of what will likely happen with them, as well as what the relationship would be. So family is a tricky subject for me, like a sensitive one, which I am still working through, what family is and the concept of that. So work in progress there. But yeah, that was essentially it, and it was amazing to finally leave. So I'm gonna leave it there. I'd love to hear your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and speak to you on the next one. Let me know what you'd like to see next. Anyway, I have some ideas, but it'd be good to hear what you'd like to see from me as well. Okay, take care. Bye.